Hello and welcome to another inspiring episode of the Zarlequan podcast. I'm your host, Brittani Starr, and today we have the privilege of delving into the world of memoir writing and personal journeys. Our guest today is Kennerly Clay, a talented author and storyteller whose work delves into the complexities of family, forgiveness, and the transformative power of words. She's the author of the captivating memoir, Letters from East of Nowhere, Daddy's Words to Live, Drink, and Die By. Welcome, Kennerly.
Conversations with Indie Authors.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great introduction. I appreciate that.
Can you share a little bit about your background? Tell us who you are and what inspired you to write this.
Yeah. Well, I've been a writer for many years, personally and professionally. I write for a living, as a business writer and a marketer and so forth. And about 4 years ago, for some years, my siblings and I have been talking about, doing something with these letters that my father had written to us over the course of many years. And of course, if anybody in the family was going to do something with these letters, it would be me, the writer, right? So, at the beginning of 2019, I'm like, this is the year, this is it. I've got to do this book, and so I made the decision to start the writing. Yeah.
Okay. Your father's free-spirited lifestyle and struggles with alcoholism are central themes in your memoir. How did these aspects of his life shape your perspective and your choices?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, as I share in the book, none of us who are his children were unscathed by the genetic and environmental influences of alcoholism. I am a recovering alcoholic myself, and I share openly and freely about that in the book. But also with great compassion for my father, and his upbringing, and also that he grew up in a time, he came of age in the 60s. He and my mother were, hippie children, and part of the counterculture revolution and all that kind of thing. So, I was a product of all that. And, both of my parents were drinkers, even though they weren't together. It was just a big part of my upbringing. So it was part of my environment, my genetics, etc. But it was also a great part of my education because my mother, got sober. So I also had the gift of recovery and the education that went along with that. So, yeah.
Well, writing is a powerful tool for all of us to self-explore and to find healing.
Yeah, totally.
How has the process of writing this memoir affected you? Is that when you found your healing?
That's a really great question. And, it's like, you think that, you work through things in your life, right? You look at stuff, you look under you look under the rocks, you look in the dark places, you go to therapy, you go to AA, you do all your spiritual work, you do that kind of stuff. And it's like, I had dealt with so many, aspects of my relationship with my father or with my mother, et cetera, but you don't realize until you start writing. And if you really start digging deep, oh my gosh, I'm starting to get moved just thinking about it right now. Because as I started to write, and then I started to explore these letters, and these facets of myself started coming up. It was like, it was so raw, and things that I couldn't even remember or didn't even think to remember, from deep, I mean, from toddlerhood, that I didn't even know were there, started to come up, and so I started to work through these things that I thought I was just long over, or that because you mature and you sort of intellectualize, what I mean, but they came up like really raw and like painful, just raw emotion versus like, talking through it and all that kind of thing. So, the writing was very painful, incredibly painful. And I really turned myself inside out through the whole memoir. Talking with my mother, who I'm very fortunate to still have on this planet, who's very open. And, I confronted her about things that I've already confronted her about, but like even more stuff came up, and I just kept digging deep and asking questions. And, exploring further and asking why, and, just that kind of stuff. And it was painful, and yet very cathartic. Oh, incredibly cathartic. Yeah. So, yeah.
I think that's a good point that you bring up is, you know what? Life is messy.
Yeah.
When you think you've healed from something, you think you've moved on, and like finding his letters really made a huge impact. That's important for people to understand, I think. I think we have this thing in our head, like healing is just this wonderful thing. And I just talked through it and I was very intellectual, and that's just not at all. Life is messy. And
Totally.
so
Yeah.
what in your book, forgiveness is a big theme in the
Yes.
memoir. Can you share some insights in the forgiving process, and how you and maybe others can work through that?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people speak to me about forgiveness after having read this book. People who either are mostly people who actually maybe are still hung up on not being able to forgive people in their lives. And I really see that for people, why it's so hard. And I see why it could be hard for me if I hadn't been forgiving of people in my life. I think by nature, I'm a little bit more forgiving in general. But I think that one of the gifts of AA is that you do a lot of work around forgiveness, forgiveness of self, forgiveness of other people, not having attachments to whether people are going to respond the way you want them to or not, if you go to make amends and that kind of thing. But even in the process of writing this book, more stuff came out, family things came up that were difficult to deal with. And I had to keep forgiving people all around me who were not happy with me in the writing of certain things. And I just had to just kind of keep reminding myself that their reactions were not about me. It was about their own stuff that they hadn't dealt with, their own responses to things between them and my father that maybe were just unresolved, and really had nothing to do with me. So whatever anybody had to say or respond that was negative about me, I didn't have to armor up about it. I could just be like, you know what, that's their thing, and I can just let it be. Just let it be. I don't have to get angry about it and resentful and whatever. And I think if I didn't have those tools, I would hold on to it, or I could see how people would hold on to stuff, and of course people go through a lot of traumatic things in their lives, and it is hard to kind of not get activated or triggered by it, but you have to be reminded that you holding on to that stuff, that's your choice. You have a choice whether you get to let go of that stuff, keep letting it poison you, and because it's doing nothing for anybody, other than eating you alive, right? And that your reactions to other people has usually nothing to do with them. It has to do with your own triggers from past events, so yeah.
That's a hard thing to
Right. I can't give that to people. They have to figure that one out for themselves too.
That's pretty much accurate. Your book, it talks about you hit on that before, the like wild 60s that your parents came up in. How do you think that taught you some lessons, and what can we learn from that? Because we think of it, I think, is like lighthearted, like, oh, we're just all free loving. But I think in this instance, it was a little more destructive, maybe emotionally. And so yeah, so I want to know how that.
Yeah, it's such a great question, because even I still tend to romanticize it a little bit. I mean, there is something kind of romantic about it, being like, conceived in Haight-Ashbury, and like, my parents having come from that world, and, the stories that they told me, and yet, there was like a turning point that happened, and it was sort of like and I actually spoke to it in the book, and there was actually a specific turning point at Altamont, which was sort of the West Coast answer to Woodstock. There was a concert, where the Rolling Stones and the Hell's Angels and the murder that happened and all that kind of stuff. But that was sort of a symbolic turning point, like the end of the peace love thing, but it was also sort of this symbolic turning point in our own, the family dynamic, my parents and me, and the end of sort of the romantic end of their romantic era as well, if there ever was one. And it was like, if you didn't kind of turn the corner and sort of grow up out of that, then you were kind of doomed. And my father just kind of kept on doing both of my parents kept drinking. I don't want to like collapse it all with the 60s, but it was a time of overindulgence and like that, and if at some point you didn't kind of really start to look at addiction and disease as, potential outcomes of some of that overindulgence, then you really haven't grown from all of those experiences. So, I think I'm meandering a little bit on that topic, but yeah, there was definitely that decadence that, it's okay in that time and place, but it's like it definitely oozed out into the rest of our lives for some years.
Yeah, absolutely. So family relationships are really difficult and they can be very complex and they're ever evolving. How has your journey of writing the memoir affected your family and your relationships now?
It's another great question, because because not everyone in my family has been supportive of this book. While others in my family that are very even close to the story are fine with it. So it just depends, again, where people are in their own, I think, journey with or reconciliation with kind of the path, the destructive path of my father, or even just making peace with who he was and who he wasn't, right? Things like I think like it's like Oprah says, that what happened to you, not like it's like what happened to you, and then you just kind of like reconcile yourself with what happened to you in life, right? And you grow from that. So some people in my immediate family, were very resistant to the telling of story around my father, and others were really, really supportive of it. And so it has negatively impacted some relationships. And with others, it's been really heartwarmingly like, connecting. And, and I've actually had to make a decision as I was writing. Am I willing to write my truth? And am I willing to write my story and these stories without regard and without concern for how it impacts others, because it's my story and it's my truth and it's never been told before this way. And I chose to tell it. It was like, yeah, that's my truth. I have to tell it. It was like yearning to come out of me. So yeah, so I made that decision. Yeah.
Yeah. So you are a writer. You've written other books as well, and you do business writing. Isn't that what you said?
I am. I write. I'm a content strategist and web writer. Yep.
So what advice would you give to aspiring writers?
To people who are early in their writing journey, take courses, take classes, it'll give you confidence to, hone your craft, and get better at what you do, and read a lot, read voraciously in whatever genre it is that you want to write in. Publish in, small publications or, blogs or online, wherever you can get a byline that'll kind of help you start feeling more confident about, being an author, being a published writer, that kind of thing. And I say, if you want to write and publish a book, do not be intimidated by traditional publishing or the need to go that route. Publish your own darn book if you feel, strongly and passionately about it. I think indie authors, there's a lot of great writing in the indie author space, and it's really so difficult to get, traditionally published, and that, it's very competitive. And even with the support of traditional publishing, it's not like they're really giving you all the marketing support you really need. You'd still have to go out there and publish, promote yourself tremendously. So that's my advice.
Yeah. Well, finally, Kennerly, what is next for you? What projects do you have coming up?
So I'm actually working on a 3-book series, the Menopausal Woman's Guide series. They're short, sassy books. I don't know if I should name them out loud. They have expletives in them, but but they're about menopausal women at different, and just the kind of the tough stuff that women at midlife have been through and are going through, and kind of a fed up with. And it's just kind of snarky, fun, but on point about like where we've been, what we're up to, and where we can be in the next part of our lives. And it's just a short 3-book series that'll be in paperback and ebook. Yeah.
When's that coming out?
Later this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, there you have it, folks. A truly enlightening conversation with Kennerly Clay, author of Letters from East of Nowhere, Daddy's Words to Live, Drink, and Die By. We are immensely grateful for Kennerly sharing her personal journey and insights with us today. If you found this episode moving and inspiring like we did, don't forget to check out Kennerly's book. It's available in the description box below. And as always, if you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with all your friends to keep reading, writing, and stay magical, my friends. Thank you for joining us on this enlightening episode of the Zarlequan podcast. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss a beat.